So that was one of the things I've always tried to help people with is don't get angry. And it's not about, giving up or revenge and all this stuff. It's really, nobody's trying to do this to you. You know, the people at the hospital, at the medical school, they just don't understand. And people in seventh grade just don't understand. And so it's not always as bad as it seems, first of all. But if you can't stay positive and in yourself and look for what's right in front of you, then that's really important. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned.
It takes something a little more to lead with impact. I'm Lisa Nichols, author of Something Extra, and this podcast was inspired by our daughter Allie, whose additional chromosome has shaped how I see people in leadership. Each episode features conversations with inspiring leaders from around the world about what truly defines how they lead and serve others. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It helps more people discover the show. And if you'd like to go deeper, my book, Something Extra, is available on Amazon and through other major book retailers. Today, we are joined by Jim Atwater, founder and CEO of InReturn Strategies. Jim spent over 15 years leading major operational transformations in corporate finance, but his true pivot came from personal experience. After navigating progressive hearing loss from childhood, he set out to fundamentally change how businesses view untapped talent. Jim is a strategic leader, true social innovator, and a pioneer in value-driven business growth. Well, Jim Atwater, welcome to the Something Extra podcast. I'm delighted that we can make this work today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm incredibly excited, first of all, to have met you and incredibly excited to be on your show that is gaining so much traction and absolute awards I know you got last week.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Right. Yeah. You know what? And it's all because of people like you, though, Jim. It's you guys that are on the show that make the show. It really, truly is. So, very grateful for that. But you know what? First of all, I have to give a big shout out to our mutual friend, Jim Bechtold. Because if it weren't for Jim, you and I may not have met each other. Although, you're Kansas City, you're not that far away, but, we may have met each other, but I'm just so grateful to Jim because he always connects me to really special people, and I really appreciate that and always want to give him credit. So, I'm grateful for that. But we've got a lot to talk about, Jim. But for those listeners who have not met you, I would really love for you to go back and tell the story behind that little boy who struggled through 1st grade, the hearing test, and how did that shape who you are today? And honestly, it's shaping what you're doing today as your life work. And so I know I've read the story, but I would love for you to tell our listeners the story.
Lisa, that's a long way back. So let me think about that just real quickly. First grade,
1st grade.
and Southern California. Um, it's unique. That's part of a unique long story because that was the first time I really figured out that people thought I was different and they didn't know what to do with me. So every first grader back in the day had to take a hearing test. And of course, I didn't pass it. And this was 1977. So hearing aids were there, but they were kind of awkward. And so obviously I didn't have hearing aids, but the people administering the test didn't believe that I'd failed it. They thought I was just trying to do that.
Mhm.
And so they made me sit there all day while the rest of the school took the hearing test and made me take the hearing test maybe like 5 or 6 times. And so I'm I'm 7. I mean, I don't know what's going on. And so
Mhm.
I just did it. And fast forward throughout your life, well, you're in groups of people, and there's group conversations going on, and you can't really participate in those conversations, and decisions are being made socially with your friends and everything, and you're just not part of that, but you don't realize it at the time. You don't really realize what's going on. You're there, right? And
Hmm.
part of the group. And but those things have impacts on people over time. And so it just made me acutely aware of how to really pay attention to people, I think, is one of those things. And it's not so much about empathy or those kinds of things. It's really just a fact. Is um, that's part of how do we include people? Why do we include people? Why don't we include people? And so it's just an interesting thing, when those things happen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm sure, Jim, just kind of like you said, they didn't really know what to do. And it wasn't maliciousness probably on their part. It's just they thought you were kind of goofing off, right? And not really taking the test. And so a lot of times it's a lack of education, I would say, a lack of
Yep.
awareness, right? And I know that's something that you have spent your life really advocating for differently abled people. And we're going to talk about that. But, you do have progressive hearing loss. Finally, you received cochlear implants. And I'm sure that that was probably opened up a new world to you, right? When that
So,
happened.
yeah. So when I finally lost my hearing, excuse me, when I was about 26 or 27. And so that was when you're no longer able to discriminate speech. And so
Hmm.
hearing aids were not an option anymore. Cochlear implants were still relatively new. It was 1997. I think you were only allowed to get one on one side. And you wore a big battery pack on your belt. That was what powered it. And a big wire ran up to your head. It was really awkward. But but the interesting thing is, yeah, I did. It took a long time for my brain to be able to make sense out of those electronic signals that the device was sending it, because they'd never heard those frequencies before. So
Right.
the higher frequencies, like I'd never really heard birds. I'd never really heard that microwaves have a beat. And so just trying to figure out what all this noise was was kind of nerve-wracking at the same time as fun.
Right.
But
Right.
now I love listening to music. I finally figured out, it took about 8 years before I could process music in my head, and but I just love it now. I'm very fortunate.
Oh, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you're able to hear music because I was thinking about you this morning, Jim, and I think that is the thing I would miss the most is just hearing the music. So I'm so grateful for that. But I read a story about you where a Latin professor refused to accommodate your hearing loss. I'm sorry for that. I'm sure that was a very painful experience. I think you ended up switching schools because of that.
Yeah,
Right? But, what did that experience teach you?
yeah. So this is another one of those things that little things that just keep adding up where um you don't feel fully in control of your path.
Mhm.
At university, I was playing tennis. I was playing really good tennis. I loved it, made some great friends, but I couldn't get the foreign language requirement waived. And not being able to hear, this is obviously before implants and everything else. Um, and most of the foreign languages, obviously, they're talking. And so I did everything I could. I got a tutor, I had really good grades otherwise. But I failed the class for the first time and eventually wound up transferring to Xavier in Ohio, where they would waive the
The foreign
foreign
language.
language, and I took 4 years of art history instead. So, but Lisa, this was in a time when people really didn't understand And
That's right.
yeah, I don't even know if ADA was there in 1988, 89 or whatever, but it was,
Mm-hmm.
there just weren't any rules or understanding of what people could or couldn't do, and how to accommodate them.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking back again, there's always a path that you're going to take, but you'll see later along in my life where all of this stuff just added up to the moment that I'm in now. Uh,
Absolutely, Jim. That's what I always say. It's like life
yeah,
is like a bunch of dots. If you remembered, the dots, right, in the pictures, and it's like as you're going through it, you don't really see how this makes a beautiful picture.
yeah,
But on the other side, give it a little time and you can start connecting those dots and understand,
no
because
doubt.
you're a huge advocate. I mean, you're a huge advocate for differently abled people now, and you know what it was like going through, and so you're so much more equipped, I would say, to help in that regard and to help people. So um it turned out to be a beautiful picture, but it didn't end there because I know that you really had a dream. I think your dream was to be this rural doctor. You had worked a summer in Colorado at a ranch
Yeah. So,
and decided you wanted to do that.
yeah, I always wanted to be a doctor, and I really wanted to be a rural doctor. And because I love being outside and I love being outside of the city and with, you know, animals and everything. And I just love the whole environment. So Lisa, when I graduated college with an economics degree, I was in part of two honor societies, and I was in the top 10% of the class. So I went after school to take pre-med classes so I could satisfy that before I applied for medical school. I really wanted the business degree to be a better doctor. And so after applying, they literally looked me in the face and said, Jim, those old doctors are not going to repeat themselves for you. And even though I aced the interviews and all this stuff, I didn't get into medical school. And so I was like, that's 5 years of my income generating life that's just gone, right? And with nothing
Right.
after that. And so, but again, that's in the moment, and all of these things start to add up. Um, I did get to meet with the chancellor of the school after that, not with the purpose of, trying to get back in line or anything, but really just to help them understand what was going on. And she just couldn't believe it. And so she was like, Jim, if you apply, you don't have to take the MCATs again. You just need to apply. I was like, I'm building a house, I'm having kids. I think I'm just gonna move on at this point. So
Mhm. Mhm.
um
So basically what it was is they were telling you that the
yeah,
older doctors to mentor you and that we're not going to slow down
yeah.
to understand you, and boy, I mean that's
The main point there, Lisa, is there's a million people like me, uh,
yes.
at least. And so they've been spending tens of millions of dollars even since then, and they still are today trying to solve a rural medicine problem. Not enough doctors, but they're not looking in places where they might find them.
Yeah. And I
So,
mean, you would definitely have had the smarts, right? To be a Dr. Jim, you had the passion because you had already decided that's what you wanted to do. So I'm really hoping that, even if there's people out there today that are listening that maybe don't really understand the differently abled community, that they'll come away with better understanding today. And that's my hope and my prayer for our conversation. But, I mean, you've had a lot of leadership lessons, Jim, come from facing barriers. I mean, your whole entire life, right? That many people never have to navigate. I mean, what are some of those leadership lessons? Because I know that you went on to work, I think, for 15 years at American Century Investments. Your economics degree, I'm sure, came and your business degree came into play there. But what are some of those lessons that you learned from facing these barriers and having to overcome? I'm sure resilience, never quit, pivoting, having a mindset to pivot, but agility. What other leadership lessons might you have learned?
Yeah, so it's just interesting, Lisa. The lessons learned have been ongoing every day, not just from the past, but I hope to learn something every day. And,
Yes.
and the most important thing is, you still have to look at inward. You still have to look and see what you're doing and who you are and not get away from that, um, and not get angry. So
Mm.
I had I had a friend, I've helped a lot of people find their path into employment and everything they want to do just by the nature of what I'm doing. And I had one individual, he had ADD, ADHD, and his father was not always there for him and so forth. And he was just angry about it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, let's not get angry. Let's figure out, how you're valuable, and let's talk about that. And he really took that to heart and started to think, people are going to want me if I can talk about those things, and I'm not really in the hole that I think I am.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that doesn't determine me and where I go. So that was one of the things I've always tried to help people with is don't get angry. And it's not about, giving up or revenge and all this stuff. It's really, nobody's trying to do this to you. You know, the people at the hospital, at the medical school, they just don't understand. And people in seventh grade just don't understand. And so it's not always as bad as it seems, first of all. But if you can't stay positive and in yourself and look for what's right in front of you, then that's really important.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest lessons I learned.
That's so good. I love that, Jim. Look for what's right, and right in front of you, if you look what you do have, instead of get angry about the negative circumstances. And you know what? Here's the reality with anger. It hurts you. I mean, it gonna hurt you emotionally, it hurts you physically. I mean, it hurts the person that's holding the anger more than it hurts anybody else, really. There's definitely studies that show that, right? So,
Yes.
I love that you've been able to help people in that way. I bet, Jim, that you're a better listener.
That's that's so funny you say that. I think I'm a better observer, maybe, uh,
Right?
because growing up, I couldn't just listen and not pay attention to the person. I had to really pay attention to reading lips and the mannerisms and what people saw. I guess I hear a little differently. I don't know if I'm better.
Yeah, I love that though. I mean, you're probably using, like you said, the observing all the senses a little bit more than a typical person, right? Because you're watching body language. What's this person really feeling right now? What is the why behind whatever it is that they're saying to me? So I think what it boils down to, maybe a better way to put it, I think you're probably more attuned to understanding people and to trying to understand who they are. So was there, in your life, Jim, was there a mentor or really influential a person? Like you said, you've helped a lot of people kind of move past the anger and that sort of thing. Did you have somebody like that in your life that really helped you see, not the limitation, but the opportunity, maybe?
Yeah. So I've had so many, starting with my grandfather, my dad, and some very successful business people in Cincinnati from the Lindner family, and um, but it's funny that you talk about that anger aspect because when I started one of my first companies, trying to help organizations pay attention to and see and engage hard of hearing people as a market, I was actually this person's idea. And we were playing golf one day, and I was playing really bad. And I was starting to get angry, and he looked at me and said, "Jim, you're just getting angry, and you gotta focus on your next shot and your next shot." And so it was
Mm,
just as simple as that.
that's a leadership lesson, right?
So that gentleman was a Pepsi bottling company franchise owner, and after I left American Century and I've always wanted to do my own thing besides being a doctor. I was like trying to ask all the most successful people I know, what am I good at? What do you see me doing? And he thought for a while and he said, why don't you help people? How about you help companies serve people like you, the hard of hearing market? And I was like, is that a market? I was like, I'd never heard that before. So
Right.
yeah, so that was, one of the interesting things. My grandfather was an AVG pilot in World War II, and he taught me how to be humble. He actually grew up in Mobile, Missouri, not far from you, and on a farm. I didn't have much, and um, but he really showed me how to pay attention to people and how to respect them and how
Mm,
make sure that you're actually seeing you're not dismissing them in a way that under context that you don't understand. So
mhm.
it was
What was his first name, Jim? Your
uh
grandfather?
yeah, his name was Jim Cross.
Jim, awesome. Oh, thank you, Jim. Thanks for grandparents, right? That just that's beautiful that he built that into you and just the humility you were able to observe, the humility that he had and the respect for other people. I love that. Well, you did spend 15 years at American Century Investments. Give me one or two lessons that you learned in that chapter of your life, Jim, and then we're going to move on to really more what you're doing today. And, I think you already alluded to the fact that you started here.
Yeah,
HEAR,
yeah,
right? So you jumped on that entrepreneurial wagon in 2007. But tell me just a few of the leadership lessons that you learned at American Century.
yeah. So the leadership lesson I learned the most at American Century because I started there. I was working part-time while I was applying for medical school in the legal department, and then when that didn't happen, I just jumped on the first thing, which was part of the electronic commerce team. And this was the first opening of the web. It didn't really exist and the internet, and so I was one of 3 or 4 people on that team. I learned how to do HTML, and I was building websites all of a sudden. So and that kind of led into content management systems. And the great thing about that is that the web was at the center of the intersection of what was going on in the company. You kind of were a collective and a collective point. And so I got to see where all the silos were. I got to see where, there were opportunities for value and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So one of the biggest lessons that I took away from that was I'm just low on the ladder um, e-commerce department in a big financial company, and you see all this opportunity. Well, how do you impact it? And you're not a leader. And so I'm 20 something at the time, and I think the biggest lesson in my years there was that how do you impact things where you have no control?
Yeah.
Uh, How do you influence, and how do you get people to see the opportunities that you see and start to systematically build change for that? And so that was probably in the 15 years I was there, the biggest the biggest lesson that I took away.
Mhm. That's so good. How do you influence, right, without that title? And we know that you can, but there is, there's something you need to learn there to be able to do that, right? So, that is so good. Well, Jim, we need to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with Jim Atwater on the Something Extra podcast.
Hey there. In a challenging business climate like this, savvy leaders look to technology to find an edge. This can mean the difference between staying ahead of the curve or playing catch-up. It's time to collaborate with the highly skilled experts at Technology Partners. Our team of technologists draws upon decades of experience for your project, with each bringing a passion for solving problems and a track record of success. How can we help you overcome your biggest technology challenges? Visit technologypartners.net to book a free consultation with one of our leaders.
So welcome back, everyone, to the Something Extra podcast with Jim Atwater. So, Jim, I love what you shared about when you were working at American Century. I love that lesson that you learned how to influence, and maybe when you don't have the title. But in 2007, we already kind of alluded to this, but you jumped on the entrepreneurial wagon and you founded here. Sometimes entrepreneurship, Jim, looks really glamorous from the outside, but we both know because we've done it, right? It is hard. It is hard. What do you think are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned personally about entrepreneurship?
Yeah, Lisa, yes, it is hard. And there's no doubt. And it seems fun on the outside. Of course, the biggest lesson, well, I started being an entrepreneur, of course, before we had video chat and those things, or before it was widely used. And I couldn't just pick up the phone and go. I had to actually literally go to where I was to meet with people, and things were very slow. And
Right.
so I put so much weight on each one of those meetings, um, because I thought I had to nail it every single time. I mean, months could go by before the next one, and or weeks, and if I had to drive to Cincinnati, if I had to go to Washington D.C., and so forth. Um, and really, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you know that's it never hinges on one thing, and that
Right.
it seemed like it does. You're always trying to get the big thing, but that's not really what it is. It's really about learning and all the little things that you do every day that add up, and the people that you get at your table. So this is really important, especially if you are trying to influence a change that's big. And I can't say enough. There's I was in several accelerators. Um, One that was associated with the Points of Light out of Atlanta and Washington D.C. And I'm in a really awesome group here in Kansas City called Pipeline Entrepreneurs. I don't know if you've heard of that. But
I've not, but I know
everybody's
I know the
yeah,
entrepreneurship,
yeah,
entrepreneurial ecosystem in Kansas City is very strong with the
yeah,
Kauffman Foundation, and you guys have a lot of great resources there.
yeah. And everybody's trying to help you. And there are tons of resources, and it's just sorting through those things is not always easy. It's not always beneficial. And keeping that focus on what you're doing and what you need to do that day and that week and everything is probably, it's not life and death. Nothing
Mhm.
is, right? Um,
Right.
but a lot of times it seems like it. So
Yes.
you just have to realize that even the most successful companies, nobody's going, very few people are going to win the lottery. It's all about the work, and the time it takes to do it is never what you think it's going to be, as you know. So,
Yeah.
mm,
Oh, yeah. There's so many things.
yeah,
Patience.
it's,
Patience. Things don't happen nearly as quickly sometimes as we would like, and I like what you said, Jim. It's not life and death. It's not life and death, but sometimes you feel like it when you're an entrepreneur and you feel like everything is hinging on you and the decisions that you're making and the work that you do. So you nailed it. I mean, because yeah, and I even like what you said, and this is something for our listeners that all the accelerators, all the things we could be doing, but what is the best thing to do for your business? And so, we don't want to get into this mode of comparing our business or what we're doing to somebody else's, because it's different, right? And you're on your own different path. So I really like so much of what you said there. But, you know, some people talk about disability and inclusion, Jim, as being more of a social issue, but you talk about it as being an economic opportunity. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So this is really important because if it remains a social issue, then we can't advance how we value. We know how to help those people, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to value them if it's not an economic issue. And those are two very different things. And
Yes.
for a company who's in business to make money, that's what they do, it's the most important thing to understand is that your company, every company, you have everything, you own everything everybody needs to be part of life. You own the products and services that they need to be part of life socially with their friends and everybody else. And you own the jobs that they need to be part of life economically. And so the majority of companies, we haven't cracked this yet. My whole mission is how do we scale the value of our community, Lisa, into the economy? And how is
Mm-hmm.
that from how we do things today? And what does that look like? What does the conversation look like? Can we build trust between our community and the companies that have everything we need to be part of life so that we can eventually determine our own life outcomes?
Mm-hmm.
So, this is really important because as a company, we may be doing tons of stuff. We may be giving away millions of dollars. We may be volunteering. But that's the social bucket. And, you know, we buy stuff. Allie buys stuff, and she wants
Right.
to stuff.
She
Um,
does. She's a very good customer of Starbucks, Jim. Yes.
so there's just this is really an $18 trillion global market. This is, again, it's not how are people disabled or what they can't do, but how are they valuable is the question that we need to solve. And that's what we can't do today. We don't know because we've never asked them. The first thing that somebody says when they hear the word disability is, well, what can they do? What can't they do? And then it becomes about that one person, Jim Atwater, applying for medical school. Not can we leverage the deaf and hard of hearing population of 1 million plus people to solve the rural medical problem. It's just Jim, and Jim is very disruptive, and we don't know what to do with that. It's not necessarily worth our time.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't see past Jim, if I can't see past a deaf person, what I really need to know is, well, how many of these people are there? Their families and friends, what do they want? What do they need to do? And but we're not having that conversation, and it's so important because Lisa, I get calls from vice presidents of major companies asking me if I can help the twins with cerebral palsy and so forth, get a job, do something.
Right.
And I'm like, aren't you the VP of this this huge company? You know,
Yes.
what I'm talking about though is the fact that that individual can't have the conversation at his company or other companies because the listener is not there on the other side. They don't know how to have a conversation, and this person doesn't really know what to tell them. he doesn't want to go and ask for help, or can you do a favor, or that's the social conversation, right?
Right, right,
The
right.
economic conversation is, how many of these VPs are there? How many twins are there? How many? What's not disruptive? Can we find 1,000 people in our around our business to do something? Or who wants to use that conversation just doesn't happen. The economic one
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't happen.
Well, I know you're out to change that, Jim. I know you're out to change that, and I know that you may not feel like you are, but I know you're making a dent. So I want to talk about InReturn Strategies and Aptly, and I know they really work in tandem with one another, and these are both companies that you have founded. Um, can you first of all tell our listeners there's a nonprofit arm and a profit for-profit arm. The In Return Strategies is for-profit, Aptly is not in the nonprofit sector. But first of all, tell our listeners, what are they? What are they? What are you hoping to accomplish with both of those?
Yeah. So a lot of this, what we're talking about is, how do we discover the economic opportunity? And well, we have to have a direct engagement with with this audience first. And to do that, we don't know how to have this conversation other than, how can I help you? And so forth. How can I see you? How can it not be so much friction for our marketing department to engage and for you to engage with us? So very simply, in-return strategies, the for-profit part provides the companies with the tools that they need and the dialogue and the narrative and everything they need to be on this side of the conversation. And we're going to help them know how to talk to
Mm-hmm.
people that they don't understand necessarily. And it makes it easy in a way that trust can be built. So it's not about inclusion. It's not about this top down thing. It's about, hey, we we understand you're already here and you're right in front of us and we know you, but we don't really know how to initiate this conversation. But this is what we want to do. We don't want to just help you. We want to build value with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm paraphrasing this, but essentially that's how the conversation, not of the last 100 years that we can't repeat if we want to move forward together, but the conversation for the next 100 years should start with, how do we build value? I'm sure that you have many business partners, and I'm sure that whenever you meet them, you're not working with them based on what they can't do. So why would we start there? And
Right. It's so good.
yeah, that's the conversation of the past. And aptly is the other side of the conversation is, how do we help these families, provide them with the tools to understand and communicate how they're valuable, who they are, where they are, what they want to do, and so forth, so that they can be part of that conversation with these companies. And you'd think, so the vice president of that big company, he doesn't really know how to tell me how his twins are valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
He knows, but he doesn't really know how to tell it all the time in the context that we need him to. So that's what Aptly is for, is to give those families a voice and collectively give them a voice, so that it's not one person at a time, but
Mm-hmm.
thousands, millions of people at a time. And
Right.
that information can be used.
So Jim, I'm just thinking, if there's a company out there that is listening and they want to understand more, what does an engagement look like? Can you just, how would they even get started with an engagement to explore the economic value, not a social issue, but what can they do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lisa, and I appreciate you asking it. So this is a situation, again, we've been doing it this way for 100 years. We've been seeing these people this way for 100 years. We don't know what we don't know. And it's a situation where we really have to crawl, not walk before we run, but crawl before we walk. And
Mm-hmm. Right.
there's very little trust between companies in this audience because they've never been in direct engagement, right? They've always interacted indirectly through social sector groups and so forth.
Mhm.
So all these parents might be sitting in a church basement or somewhere together with like families, talking about what they want to do, what they can't do for themselves. But we really need companies to be part of that conversation. And so the first thing to do to answer your question is I need to help companies, you know, in the form of a little bit of consulting with the CMO, the strategic leader, about how to talk to these people and give them a playbook that is very simple and they can integrate into, because these aren't separate people over here, they are people they're interacting with, they just don't know it.
Right.
So the first thing is, how do I talk to my employees? How do I talk to, and it's not necessarily about inclusion. Again, it's about building value together, and that's a different
Mhm.
conversation.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Um, one question, and then we're gonna talk about something extra. Jim, when you look ahead 10 years, what do you hope has changed for people that are differently abled and other underserved populations?
So I hope that they are a valuable part of the economy. That's that's the goal. And what does that mean? What does it look like? Companies are actively engaging them through their products and services and not just their charity. And
Mhm.
ultimately, as they get to know these people through their products and services, and everybody in their company gets to know them because they're interacting with them, that will be done with all these top-down social initiatives that really don't fit into business. And
Yeah.
they have a great heart. They have a real purpose to bring awareness, but when it turns into operations and how does everybody at the company understand what they're trying to do? They want to do those good things, but their day-to-day thinking, how do I prioritize this when I really am supposed to be spending my time on, if I'm a wealth manager, building assets under management and all these other things and new products
Mhm.
and innovating for my company to grow? These are kind of oil and water, right?
Mhm.
I'm hoping that every company will be able to have the conversation that I know how to have. And I'm hoping that those people are going to start to trust that these companies actually want to build value with them. That they're going to be, so if I have a kid with autism, I'm going to be able to walk into HR and not ask for a favor and be disruptive and usually probably fail at the end. Uh, there's going to be a path for me through a front door and not through a disability program that the company works with and so forth. So
Yeah.
I
That's
want,
so good. I pray that too, Jim. I pray that too, and I know you're on the front lines every day fighting for that future. So, we're with you. We're with you. Well, Jim, this is called something extra. What do you believe is the something extra that every leader needs?
so I think my big something extra, and I put a lot of thought in this after reading your book, Lisa, is you can't have, there's no addition by subtraction. And that can mean many things, but that's rooted in the fact that the different variables have been subtracted from life and social and economics for a long time. And
Yeah.
but I'm not just pointing that out. There's many parts of society that have, but I think if we want to have the best long-term outcomes as a company and growth for a company, we need to not just look past the short term, but really understand what's being subtracted when we do things. And, that's hard to do, but it's not if we do the things that we're talking about. And we shouldn't be subtracting a million deaf people from being doctors. We shouldn't be, there's value there if we can learn how.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was working at American Century, this was all about silos and breaking those silos down for business process improvement. And people just don't know. And
Right.
it's really up to everybody just to be thinking and the company to provide the systems that people need to be able to be adding and individually understand their own value to always be adding instead of subtracting,
That's
whether they
so
know
good. That's a very unique answer,
it.
Jim. I've not had anybody say that, but knowing who you are and what you are trying to do, it's so good. Yeah. There's no addition by subtracting. So, so good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Jim. I have really thoroughly enjoyed this. And, I'm really hoping that a lot of people tune in and they come away with a new perspective and a new paradigm about how they think about this.
Well, again, Lisa, I'm so glad that we got to meet. I'll be meeting with Jim in Cincinnati on Thursday morning, so
Oh, wonderful. Tell him hello for me. He's
I
truly one of
wish.
my favorite people. And you guys shared the same name,
Yep.
Jim, so you well, thank you again so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. And God bless you in all the things that you're doing, Jim. And may God bless the work of your hands because it's important work.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me.
Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc. 2019. To learn more about this week's guest, check out the show notes at tpi.co/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving us a review. Thank you for listening to Something Extra.